Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Right, this is Asad from Fire TV. Right, this is a wonderful morning, and we are here to meet the person behind who's taking care of all the refugee problems here in Pakistan, the country representative, Mr. Inderika Ratawate. Right, Mr. Inderika Ratawate, good morning, sir, and welcome to Fire TV.
Good morning, Asad. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Mr. Ratawate, right, what's the role of UNHCR in terms of looking at Pakistan as being one of the largest refugee centers, right, for the last 3 decades?
Asad, I think Pakistan has an exemplary record of protecting and granting asylum and for refugees for the last 37 years. And I think today, if you look at the numbers, despite emerging crises in Syria and other places, Pakistan still hosts the largest protracted refugee population in this country. And I think what needs recognition here that the government and people of Pakistan have extended that hospitality and generosity primarily because of its heritage, its tradition, its Islamic values, and also playing a very important role for the international community. It's a global public good that they have done in hosting refugees for so long. And UNHCR has been in that partnership, as you rightly say, for 37 years with the people and government of Pakistan. And we have tried together with the international community, the government of Afghanistan and Pakistan to find solutions for Afghan refugees. Progress has been made, but challenges also remain quite a few in the context as we see today globally and in the region.
But Mr. Ratawate, right, don't you see, right, that that is actually affecting the country, right? Because they're hosting, right, such a large population over here. Do you think so, right, that from your perspective, right, it's actually affecting our economy, our structure?
I think in any refugee situation, particularly with such large numbers, it has an impact on the host country. Today, globally, we have 65 million people who are refugees and displaced, and 86% of that population is hosted by middle income and developing countries. 86%. So it's a global phenomenon which impacts host countries.
65 million and 86% is being hosted by the countries, right, that are still, right, to find their way out, right, into the current modern world, right? Don't you think so, right? That's a bit strange for a country like us to understand, or for the countries, right, that can cater, right, this population.
I think you raise a very complex question, which has maybe a couple of angles. One is refugees are individuals who flee war and persecution and conflict, right? They don't do it by choice. So when they flee normally to the closest border, across the border. And history is such that you can't choose your neighbors. So refugee flows are, if you look at around the world, people fleeing situations across the border to another country for refuge. And that puts pressure, as you rightly say, on that host country. The international community and UNHCR tries to share that burden in two ways. One is to support the host countries, like Pakistan, in the hosting of refugees. And the second is to try and also take individuals who can't have any protection or solutions in Pakistan to third countries, to resettle them in third countries. Now, over the last 37 years, UNHCR and the international community has played a significant role in supporting Pakistan. In the initial days, in setting up the camps, providing the food, health, education, as a sign of solidarity with Pakistan, in which what Pakistan is doing. Now, you can ask the question, well, 37 years later, there is no solution in sight, so there's an impact. Absolutely, there has been an impact on the systems, on the national systems in this country, and that's where I think it's really important to continue that support to the host communities who actually are impacted the most.
All right, Mr. Ratawati, right? We know, right, that you've been here in 2002 as well, right? You came back in 2012 and 13, right? It's been 4 years. How would you define, right, Pakistan, right? And how would you see, right, that the relationship has developed with the passage of time for the last some decades, right, between UNHCR and Pakistan?
I think it's been a very close relationship. We've always worked together, And I think the successes we had despite the challenges speak for itself. And if I may just highlight a couple. One, I think, is the first ever biometric registration of a large refugee population in the world has been done in Pakistan, together with NADRA and UNHCR, for example. The largest ever voluntary repatriation operation in the world of refugees going back home, supported by UNHCR, has been in Pakistan. 3.8 million Afghan refugees have gone back with UNHCR support and facilitation. The Pakistani government has played a leading role in this, in spearheading policies, for example, the registration and the documentation, the voluntary repatriation, in trying to find solutions. But right now, when one looks at the global context of emerging crises, which are taking the attention of the international community, which is absorbing the resources because of its magnitude and the humanitarian nature, protracted refugee situations like the Afghan refugee situation, and countries like Pakistan, who have been bearing the burden for so long, they are not getting the attention and the resources they deserve. And that is our role in partnership to make sure that the international community's attention is refocused on situations like the Afghan refugee situation, that support and resources are continue to be committed to Pakistan until such time all the refugees have solutions, and that the host communities in this country who have traditionally been with the Afghan refugees, sharing their meager land, their water, their resources, are supported. The international community has to continue to do that, because that is the solidarity that Pakistan deserves and should always be there for the
Mr.
Pakistani people.
Rathavati, right? You mentioned, right, that the biometric installation, right, and recognition is there, and you do understand, right, that the survey as a program, right, that has been conducted by the army, which is the most successful program that we have seen till date. The prime cause of that was, right, to corner the terrorists, right, and since the government blames, right, part of terrorism associated with Afghans, right, do you think so, right, that this biometric integration and this recognition might can help the country, the government and the armed forces in terms of identifying, right, those elements, right, that have caused destruction over and over in our country?
I think in terms of national security, for any sovereign state, knowing who's on your territory, having an identity, and in this day and age, a biometric is essential. And I think to that extent, the registration not only of all Pakistanis with the CNIC, which is an advanced state-of-the-art biometric registration, but also the refugees was very important. And right now, I think particularly with the efforts being taken by the government to ensure law and order and security and address terrorism-related issues and national security issues, it's incredibly important that Pakistan, as part of its sovereign right, should know who's on its territory. And I think that really is an important point. And I think also the measures being taken right now by the government to have a robust border management and regulation is also important in that context.
Now, as the rule defines, right, to take care of the refugees, right, now, what is the estimation of UNHCR, right, that where they see, right, the disbursement of all these refugees, right, going back to their native land, right, and actually progressing for where they should be, right? What's the plan of UNHCR in terms of that?
In 2012, UNHCR, together with Afghanistan as the country of origin for refugees, and the government of Iran and the government of Pakistan, we sat together and said, look, between 2002 and 2008, a large number of refugees repatriated voluntarily. There was hope, there was things moving ahead. But by the time it came 2009, 10, 11, security situation was not that good, and the repatriation started dropping dramatically. So we sat down together and said, what do we do now? Because there's still a large population remaining in Pakistan and Afghanistan, in Iran. And there was an agreement with the three governments as the two host countries, and Afghanistan being the country of origin, to do three things. One was to continue supporting voluntary repatriation, which is the preferred solution, obviously, for all refugees to go back home. The second, which is the most challenging and important, is to ensure the sustainable reintegration of refugees once they go back to Afghanistan. Because repatriation is not meaningful if the people are not anchored back home. So that is the second part of it. And the third was, until such time voluntary repatriation can continue, that the host countries and the host communities continue to get support from the international community. Now, Asad, the challenge, when you look back since 2012 on what is called the solution strategy for Afghan refugees, that's what it was called, it was endorsed by the international community. Voluntary repatriation.
I want to cut you away. Is it just endorsed, right? Or do you think so, right, that there has been measures, right, that these international communities, or right, or the Western communities are taking in terms of facilitating either Pakistan or Iran?
Indeed, that's the point I was coming to. Under that, the voluntary repatriation, UNHCR most recently, as of 2 weeks ago, has doubled its reintegration grant from $200 per returning refugee to $400. So that means a family of 7 Afghans, average family, receives about $2,800 or 3 lakh rupees, right, to go back. 1. 2, the biggest part, to address your question, under the solution strategy, we insisted as UNHCR to the international community that enabling Afghans to go back home and reintegrate in a sustainable manner requires a development intervention. For example, if you talk to refugees, which we do all the time, and you have a shura and you ask the elders, what are the biggest challenges for you to go back? They will start by saying, I would like some degree of access to livelihood, just to be able to earn some living, and some access to basic services and like water, sanitation, education and health. And lastly comes a security issue. So that is what they need, and that's the investment that is needed. And we have insisted and requested and pleaded the case that unless those programs at the community level, because individuals go to communities, unless there are programs at the community level that has some basic health, basic education and livelihoods, how do you attract refugees back? And more importantly, not just attract, make them stay back. And that has been, Asad, the biggest challenge, that such programs in the high return areas of Afghanistan really haven't been sufficient to attract refugees back and to enable them to anchor in their communities. And the most recent effort we made to the international community, and will be done in the upcoming events of the United Nations General Assembly, which is convening a heads of state meeting on refugees and migrants on the 19th of September. And more importantly, the Brussels meeting that's coming on the 4th and 5th of October, specifically where the international community is going to pledge for Afghanistan for the next 3 years.
You mentioned, right, that the general idea that comes from a refugee, from a community or from a family would be, right, to have an access to the basic rights for a family or for a human being, right? As you said, sanitary, water, education, livelihood, right, and sense of security. Do you think so, right, that by increasing the amount, right, was that an attraction? Was that a bait? Or is UNHCR is actually trying to facilitate the host country and the country that they are going to go back to provide these refugees, right, or their native countrymen, these facilities that ought to be there?
There are 2 elements, Asad, which is, one is very clearly, as I was saying, and you rightly said, accessing services is a development intervention. UNHCR is not a development agency. That is the responsibility of the Afghan government and the international community to support the Afghan government in those programs, right?
UNHCR is actually facilitating and creating a route for them.
And exactly, on one side, what we do is advocating on that precise point. And the solution strategy says that is the investment that is needed inside Afghanistan, 1. 2, we have a role as UNHCR to support voluntary repatriation. That's part of our mandate. So together with the Afghan government and the Pakistani government, we say, how can we give the first startup package for Afghan refugees to go? That is what we call the Repatriation and Reintegration grant I was referring to, right? $400 per person. That is meant to just enable the repatriation and just the initial anchoring. But the anchoring is only successful if the other programs kick in. So that is the challenge. And as you rightly... Exactly, and that is exactly our point, saying as UNHCR, our role is to facilitate that repatriation, and as you rightly said, Asad, the host community. Now for the host communities, we have a very specific program in Pakistan called the Refugee Affected and Host Area Programs. And that program over the last 4-5 years has put in about $180 million, affecting 85% the Pakistani host communities and about 15% the refugees who live with them. That is in education, health and infrastructure. For example, if there is a school to which, say, there are 10% Afghan refugee children going a public school, we will support that school with additional classrooms, we'll support with partners the teachers, and work with the education department in the province to enhance that capacity, for example. Or if there is health clinics, we would help that. So that was what UNHCR has done together with the international community, the refugee host community support, because as you rightly said, the communities who are hosting refugees bear the brunt of their presence and the burden is on them. So that's part of what we do to advocate, and we have continued again to say Pakistan deserves that support for the host communities until such time the refugees can repatriate.
All right. UNHCR, right, is working with the Pakistan government, right? And we understand, right, that it's an institute, it's an organization, and it's a government, right? In the last 4 years, how would you have seen the sentiments of the people actually living in Pakistan, right, in terms of actually catering a large number of refugees, right? Because their idea and their philosophy is, right, that our rights and our structure and our resources and our amounts, right, that we pay for taxes are being utilized on something which is not ours, right? So how would you cater those sentiments?
I think if I were to look at when I worked here before from 2003 to 2006 and now, at the community level, if you go and sit in a village with, say, Afghan Pashtun, Pakistani Pashtun, or Baluch, or in Karachi and Sindh, the communities that live together with refugees, they are still very hospitable. They share what they share. When there's a problem in the communities, they try to help each other. And I think it's remarkable, unlike any other place, many places in the world, there has never been conflict between refugee communities and Pakistani host communities. Individuals might have some differences, but as communities, as clashes, never. There has never. They've always coexisted in harmony, one. Maybe it's because of the linguistic affinity, the ethnic affinity, the religious affinity, but that's one. The second, I think you are absolutely right. Today, there is a feeling that's saying, so when do we see the light at the end of the tunnel? How long are we going to be a host? And the best of hosts, also there's a time you say, enough is enough. There is, I think, a growing sentiment among some in civil society who feel.
You might have seen that in the news and media as well.
Indeed.
Right? That part of it is actually growing and it's coming out, right?
Indeed.
These sentiments, right?
Indeed. Where it's seen as the Afghan refugee presence is seen as a burden, and that there are issues that need to be dealt with, and that the burden sharing or the responsibility sharing of the international community is not enough. And the reality on this one, quite candidly, as UNHCR, we've said this in public, is more needs to be done to support Pakistan, and much more needs to be done to support the Afghan government to enable the sustainable repatriation and reintegration. And that is something we are putting very strongly to the international community right now. Because UNHCR, as you know, Asad, very well, we can only do what the resources we get from the international community.
That I understand.
And we are advocating, saying not enough is being done for Afghan refugees.
All right. Now, I wanted to shift your focus, right, from Afghan refugees, right, to the Syrian crisis. What's UNHCR's take on that, right, and what measures, right, that they have taken, right, to take care of this one problem?
Today, in terms of numbers, there are more Syrian refugees. The largest refugee population are Syrian refugees. They have overtaken Afghan refugees in numbers. But Pakistan remains the largest protracted refugee hosting country in terms of the duration of hosting refugees. Turkey, for example, has more refugees than Pakistan today. But it's been only for 4 to 5 years. And what UNHCR does here is supporting all the host countries around Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, etc., with the refugee response and managing refugees. Some countries have committed a lot of resources of their own, for example, like Turkey, and other countries have been saturated. For example, in Lebanon, 1 in 4 people in Lebanon is a refugee. A quarter of Lebanon's population is a refugee population. So this is a huge burden on the countries and a huge challenge. So we support the government with, again, assistance to the refugees. And also what we are trying to say is the real solution to that crisis is a political solution within Syria. Refugees are a symptom of conflict. Refugees are a symptom of the inability of the international community, in the case of Syria, to come up with a real political solution for a problem. Refugees are always a symptom. That is the sad thing.
Uh, uh, how would you see this, right? That normally that in our discussion you mentioned, right, that either it's Pakistan, right, that's taking care of refugees, it's Iran that's taking care of refugees, part of it, right? If it's Turkey right now, but then there's one continent out there, the Arab continent, right, that can facilitate. They've got the resources, right? But partially, do you think so, right, that they have ignored this segment, right, that they could have taken the Syrian refugees, right? And in terms of the burden sharing for with the UNHCR, right? Has UNHCR been in conversation with the Arab community, right, or with the Muslim Ummah, right, that they could have participated, right, and shared the burden?
I think 2 points to your question, Asad. I think with the Syrian refugee crisis, the Gulf countries have got much more engaged in humanitarian work and supporting the refugee crisis. The Gulf countries do contribute significantly to managing Syrian refugees in the host countries around, and that's changed, which is a very welcome and a very supportive sign. There are big bilaterals as well, but in the international community, I think some governments and some countries prefer to go bilateral with the two countries. Some are more multilateral, and we are trying to encourage that. In the case of Pakistan, for example, the many GCC countries are big bilateral supporters to Pakistan. We are engaging them and saying, please, with the Afghan refugees, help and put more resources to the Afghan refugee crisis. And one last point on that, Asad, I think the GCC countries have done a lot for the Syrian refugee situation. I think they could do a lot more for the Afghan refugee situation.
Okay, Mr. Indrika, my question to you is that since refugees are living a miserable life in their host countries, normally they lack normal basic facilities, health, education. Although UNHCR is playing an effective role in providing all those basic health facilities and education related facilities, but since they are going through a psychological trauma as well, so is UNHCR developing any policies in future, or are there any policies currently implemented to take care of that psychological issues that they have to face?
Yes, I think as you rightly say, one of the most traumatic experiences anybody can have is to leave everything you have and flee. And it is indeed a trauma that is very, very deeply felt by people, particularly the children. 60% of refugees today are children, and it keeps deep scars. What UNHCR tries to do with partners who are experienced and qualified in this area is provide the psychosocial care. So for vulnerable individuals, children, particularly focusing on children and women, because many times the women are the anchor in such situations, who have to look after the family. The men have to try and go and earn a living, so the trauma is there. So we have programs for the psychosocial well-being of refugees, and there are some really fantastic national partners and international partners who really specialize in this and come and help. But I think more needs to be done, because as I was saying to Asad, today's world is seeing the highest number of refugees ever. 4,000 people are displaced every day. That's what we're facing, more conflicts. And I think your point being that support has to actually increase much more.
The reason I'm asking you is that a few months ago we saw a picture of a little young boy who was found dead on the beach, and that was a very moving picture. So do you think that media is playing its role effectively in the international community to raise people's sentiments towards the communities that are being displaced, towards the people that have to flee from their homes and leave their countries? Is media playing effective role in portraying the right picture?
You've asked an excellent question. The answer, to be honest, is yes and no. I'll say why. Yes, in that today's world, with the soundbite and the tweet, is a short attention span. So the media looks at the drama and highlights what's happening, which is dramatic, which is normal. It gathers everybody's attention. And it's done a great job in highlighting the crises which are emerging. The big crises, the deaths, the people dying in the Mediterranean, the conflicts, wars, which I think I applaud the media, because it brings it to the world, into your living room, and forces action. But what it could do more, and that's why I said to an extent no, is that the forgotten crises, which are not sensational anymore, 37 years down the line off the track. And I applaud you for coming and talking to us, giving the opportunity. Precisely this is what the media should do, is crises like the Afghan refugee situation 37 years later has been subsumed by the emerging dramatic crises. And the international community's focus also for a variety of reasons, including geopolitical interests. And I think the media could play a bigger role in highlighting the forgotten refugee crises and telling the world you have a responsibility.
My next question to, since when there was a large number of Syrian refugees that were moving out of their country to European countries, so European countries opened their doors for refugees. They welcomed them with open arms. People were waiting with fruits and with tins of water and so many things. But Arabian countries did not open their doors for the refugees. So do you want to give any message to the international community through the platform of FIRE to play its role more effectively towards Syrian or Arab or any refugee crisis? Do you want to?
My message would be that there is nothing more devastating than to become a refugee. And many people, if you look at history, who have great successes, from Einstein to many people, there are world leaders today who are former refugees. So it also goes to show that refugees bring with them skills, they bring with them things that they can offer which are value added. They are not just a burden, one. And two, I think, yes, the international community and the world as a whole should not compromise on compassion. Compassion is needed, tolerance is needed, even though sometimes refugee crises can inundate nation states and the hosting countries, and I think more could be done, and we should never compromise on compassion.
But how would you define, like, people are suffering from xenophobia, as you just mentioned? People are afraid to host refugees. They think that refugees are burden. So how would you, what's your take on that?
My message would be that the vast majority of individuals who are fleeing conflict, refugees who are forcibly displaced, are individuals seeking shelter. They've lost everything and they have no choice. Yes, there may be individuals, like in any society, refugee or not, who might want to abuse a system, who might have another agenda, but those people have to be dealt with under the laws of the land, prosecuted under due process and be dealt with. But one should not extrapolate from one or two people who have a bad intent and then make a broad generalization about an entire community or an entire people or an entire religion. That is not right. I don't think that's the way to do it. And there are systems in place to deal with, whether it's national security interests, whether it's violent extremism, there are ways to deal with it. But as you rightly say, to make these broad generalizations, which sometimes amount to xenophobia against individuals and communities and peoples, that is not what we are about as human beings. We should be different.
And do you think that UNHCR needs to play more effective role and needs to highlight its roles and policies and its role towards helping Afghan refugees through Pakistani media? Because we just hear that there is an organization that's called UNHCR, but we never see that on national TV, or we don't hear much about the actual implementation plans on national TV or newspapers. So do you think that UNHCR needs to extend its support and its role towards media as well, so that people should know that what you are actually doing practically?
Absolutely, there's always space to do more, and I agree with you that we as UNHCR and the refugee issue, unless there's a dramatic impact linked to it, doesn't necessarily make the cut it should. But I think we've done a lot of outreach, and there is active engagement with the media, but there's always room to improve. And I think, though, sometimes, again, that's why I was making an appeal, because it's an old issue. People tend to forget about it. And I think we've done a lot of outreach sometimes, some press releases, engagement, but it doesn't even make the cut of a sentence. But you might have a story which is very different getting there. But that's, I think, for us to work together more with the media.
If any one statement comes from a political figure regarding Afghan refugees, it makes headlines, but we never see headlines coming out of UNHCR. So I don't know, maybe your media section maybe needs to play its role more effectively. or maybe you need to implement or revise your policies so that people should know that UNHCR is catering Afghan refugees, and we need to, I mean, Pakistanis need to donate more towards the role UNHCR is trying to play.
Absolutely. I think there's more room for improvement, to do more, to outreach more. As I said, we do have quite a robust network, and we take journalists from all over Pakistan, international, to the camps. We show the work and constantly engaging, like even 2 days ago, we had the Jirga with all the Afghan elders, together with the Minister of Saffron, together with the Minister of Refugees and Repatriation of Afghanistan. We just finished a tripartite meeting 2 days ago. There were press releases, it was not necessarily picked up. But I think you're right, the public awareness, the raising awareness,
It's
we will
important,
continue to do
yes,
it, and we'll be more than happy.
to let people know that Afghan refugees uh, can play like an effective role in the economy as well, because there are so many people who are working but they are not issued ID cards, they are not registered, they cannot open bank accounts. So there are a lot of problems that they are facing it, and then usually people are not aware of it. So maybe we need to be more supportive towards this issue.
Entities like yourself, like Fire, who's taken the initiative to come to us, will work together closely with you. And you're right, you're right. That's what we have to continue doing, and doing more of it to raise the awareness around some issues. Absolutely.
Mr. Ratawate, right? You mentioned in your conversation a very important thing, right? 65 million people are refugees right now in the world, according to the stats. 65% out of 65 million, they are children. How do you see the future of this world? Because education is the key role that how you see a country or a nation or a community being developed, right? Has UNHCR taken any initiatives, right, to take care of 65% of that 65 million children that are out there, right, that are probably not even getting their basic rights, right? So who is going to take care of their education?
This is, I think, the most important investment that could be made. And UNHCR goes to great lengths together with all the partners who are invested in education, be it in the UN, UNICEF, UNESCO, but other partners are making that point, number one. Number two, in the context of the Afghan refugees, to be more precise to this particular situation, our main theme, our main investment is on youth empowerment, education, and skills. For example, most of the projects we do in the host communities are building schools, supporting teachers, and supporting the provincial education departments to enable further enrollment of children, decrease the dropout of girl children, and increase access to secondary education. Asad, you raised the most important question. If I may, if you look at the world today, and you look at what's happening, and look at the conflicts we are in, it doesn't matter the label you put on people, whether you call somebody Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Daesh. Who are these? These are young people with no opportunities, no skills, frustrated at their situation, who feel there's nothing being done to them. The world has neglected them. Their nation states have neglected them. And then somebody comes with the alternate ideology, say everybody has failed, you come join us. So this is the most important thing. Young people with skills, with education, with opportunity are agents of stability. Young people without opportunity, without skills, who are completely dislocated, are agents of instability, and that is the most important investment, I think, that can be made. And for that, UNHCR really looks at refugee children and youth as key to stability, key to empowerment, key to development, and we try to focus as much attention and resources on the children and youth.
Mr. Ratawate, thank you. UNHCR's perspective for the next 10 years, for the next decade, right? How do you see, right, the situation of the world, right? And when do you see, right, that these conflicts are going to end?
I wish I had a crystal ball, Asad, but I would say, from our institutional experience, refugees are a result of the political social fabric in a country or a community falling apart. The root causes for those are many, and unless the international community and states address those root causes. It could be poverty, disenfranchisement, political disempowerment, economics, variety of issues that come into it. If those root causes are not addressed, there will be more and more conflicts. And I truly believe, as a world community, as nation states, we have to really have the moral authority and courage to take bold decisions and commit to the political willingness that's needed as the world community to make that happen. Unless that political willingness is demonstrated through real action to address those root causes, to bring about political solutions to some of these intractable conflicts, we will have more displacement. And that is the tragedy of our times, and we have to do more to really resolve those issues.
Mr. Ratawate, UNHCR is not a political organization, yet they have to deal with world's politics. How do you guys do that?
It's an existential dilemma for us because we are a humanitarian organization, we are a protection agency, and refugees are a result of conflict and war. And we keep saying always, ensure that refugees remain a humanitarian issue, and we plead the case and we approach it like that. But it's in a sea of politics, as I said. The root causes for it is that, and it's very difficult for us, but we maintain that neutrality and the humanitarian nature of refugees because it's very important to find solutions and not get refugee issues and displacement issues linked with the morass of political issues around it. So that's always our advocacy point, saying, please, let's deal with refugee issues as a humanitarian issues. Yes, there are linkages. Political solutions need to be had, but don't take the individuals who have fled and are seeking protection, who have lost everything, and make them a pawn in a bigger game. Please keep them as a humanitarian issue. We try hard to send that message, and the press plays a great role in keeping that up there and has done a great job, I must say, showing that the individual human interest story of a person says it all. That child, as you said, on that beach, what had that child got to do with the bigger politics of it?
Yes, that was a sad incident right now. Mr. Ratawate, thank you very much, right, for giving us this opportunity, your precious time, right, because it was insightful for our viewers, for our country, and to understand, right, that the key role that UNHCR and its representatives are actually playing, right, to develop a better future. Now, a few words, right, for our viewers and for Fire TV, please.
As a message to our viewers, I think, as you said, civil society and the media have a terrific role to play in ensuring solutions for refugees. And I thank Pakistan and its people for the tremendous generosity they have shown, for the patience they have shown, and to me and to UNHCR, that generosity is what is all about humankind. And thank you for that. Continue with that. And we hope that despite the challenges, we don't lose sight of that wonderful generosity and compassion.
And Mr. Ratawate, right, few words about Fire Magazine and the online television.
I think what FIRE is doing is terrific in the sense that you're using social media in a very effective way to get a message across, and you're trying to get a very nuanced approach to challenges. And that's important. The mere fact that you come and talk to UNHCR, which is dealing with a certain issue which might not be the top issue of the day, shows that you're interested in the story behind the story and that you want to get it out to people and give the different shades of the issues. So I really thank you for that and continue the good work.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ratawate. Now, viewers, this was Mr. Indiraki Ratawate, right? The guy, right, that has said, right, that generosity can actually change everything. A heart with an intention, a heart, right, with a purpose, right, to deliver, a heart with a purpose, right, that can absorb, right, can actually change this humanity, right? Now, viewers, I might say, right, that this country has done an enormous job, right, in terms of taking care of their refugees, right? But I guess the credit goes to UNHCR. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.